Emma Carlyle believed that every morning deserved to begin with something sweet. That was the whole philosophy behind her little ritual of sneaking a cinnamon roll from the kitchen. Before her shift at Rosewood Bistro officially started, she would sit on the back step, bite into the warm, sugary dough, and remind herself that life was good even when her rent was 3 days late and her savings account looked like a sad, empty swimming pool. Rosewood Bistro sat on the corner of Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago. A polished, fancy restaurant with white tablecloths, soft jazz piping through hidden speakers, and a clientele that mostly wore suits worth more than Emma's monthly paycheck. She had been working there for 2 years, balancing plates and memorizing complicated orders with a smile that never once looked tired, even when she absolutely was. The tips were decent. The regulars liked her, and Brent, her fellow waiter and closest friend, kept her laughing through every long shift. That Tuesday morning in early November started exactly like every other. Emma tied her dark hair back, straightened her apron, and carried a fresh pot of coffee out to the dining room, where the first breakfast guests were beginning to settle in. Brent fell into step beside her, already whispering commentary about a table of finance guys in the corner, who had collectively ordered enough eggs to feed a small village. Then the front door opened, and Emma nearly walked straight into a pillar. The man who stepped inside was tall, broad-shouldered and dressed in a charcoal coat that clearly cost more than Emma made in a month. His jaw was sharp, his dark hair neatly swept back, and his eyes, a deep shade of gray, swept across the room with the calm, assessing look of someone who was used to owning every space he entered. He was, without any question, the most impossibly handsome man Emma had ever seen in real life, and she was immediately annoyed by that fact. That Brent breathed beside her is Harrison Wade. Emma had heard the name. Everyone in Chicago had heard the name. Harrison Wade was the CEO of Wade Enterprises, a luxury real estate company that had transformed entire neighborhoods and put his face on the cover of Chicago Business Monthly 3 times in 2 years. He was known for being brilliant, driven, and reportedly so difficult to warm up to that his own boardroom called him the ice architect behind his back. He was seated at table 4, which was, of course, Emma's section. She approached with her best professional smile and set a glass of water in front of him. "Good morning. My name is Emma, and I will be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with some coffee?" He did not look up from his phone. "Black. No sugar," he said, his voice even and quiet. Carrying the kind of weight that made people pay attention without him even trying, Emma poured carefully, aware of her hands, aware of everything. She turned to set the coffee pot down on the edge of the table, and then Brent appeared from nowhere, sliding past her with a full tray, knocking her elbow just slightly. Just enough. The coffee pot tilted. A dark, steaming stream of coffee poured right across the white tablecloth and splashed the sleeve of Harrison Wade's coat. The dining room seemed to hold its breath. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "Oh no, I am so sorry, please. Let me get something. I am so incredibly sorry." She was already grabbing napkins, blotting the tablecloth, her voice a tight, mortified whisper. Harrison looked at the stain on his sleeve, and then looked at her. His expression did not change. Not one flicker of anger, not one twitch of irritation. He simply said, "It is fine," and went back to his phone. That was somehow worse than if he had yelled. Emma retreated to the back of the restaurant, pressed herself against the wall beside the service station, and pulled out her phone to text Brent, who had vanished suspiciously fast. Her fingers flew across the screen. "Brent, I just poured coffee all over Harrison Wade. I am dying. He is sitting right there looking perfect and unbothered, and I am a complete disaster. Also, why did nobody tell me he looks like that in person? I need a moment." She hit send and shoved her phone into her apron pocket. It buzzed almost immediately. She pulled it out, expecting one of Brent's signature string of dramatic responses. Instead, the notification at the top of the screen read, "Harrison Wade." Her stomach turned completely over. She stared at the name. She stared at the message preview. She opened it with trembling fingers and saw her own words, staring back at her under a conversation header that was very clearly not. Brent's contact was saved as Brent with a coffee cup. Emoji Harrison Wade's number had been added to her phone 6 months ago when he had called the restaurant directly to make a reservation, and she had answered and taken down his contact to confirm the booking. She had never deleted it. She had just told Harrison Wade that he looked perfect and that she was a complete disaster. Her phone buzzed again. One new message from Harrison Wade. It said, "You should breathe, Miss Carlyle. The coat will survive." Emma stood frozen behind the service station, her face burning from her hairline all the way down to her collarbone, staring at those words, completely unable to move. While Harrison Wade sat 20 feet away at table 4, and the tiniest, almost invisible curve appeared at the corner of his mouth. Emma spent the rest of that shift operating on pure autopilot. She smiled at tables, refilled drinks, delivered plates, and said all the right things at all the right moments. But her mind was entirely elsewhere, spinning in slow, humiliated circles around that text message. By the time Harrison Wade finished his breakfast, signed the bill without complaint, and left a tip that was nearly the cost of the meal itself, Emma had convinced herself that she would never see him again. And that was for the absolute best. She was wrong. Harrison Wade came back the next morning. He sat at table 4 again, ordered black coffee with no sugar, spent 45 minutes on his phone and laptop without looking up more than twice. Emma served him with practiced calm and told herself that rich people were creatures of habit. And this meant nothing at all. He came back the morning after that too, and the one after that. By the 5th morning, Brent was watching from the coffee station with the expression of someone who had figured out a puzzle nobody asked him to solve. "He asks for your section every time," Brent said, keeping his voice low and unhelpfully entertained. "He asked Gloria, his assistant, to call ahead and confirm you would be working." "Gloria called us Emma. She called the restaurant." Emma turned slowly to look at table 4 where Harrison sat in his usual coat, his posture straight and still, his eyes on his screen. "That is a coincidence," she said firmly. "Gloria called." Brent repeated. Emma picked up the coffee pot and walked over to table 4 with every bit of composure she owned. She refilled Harrison's cup and then, instead of retreating immediately, she stood her ground. "Mr. Wade," she said, keeping her voice steady, "I want to apologize again for the incident last week. It was unprofessional, and I hope it did not cause any inconvenience." Harrison looked up. His gray eyes were calm and direct in a way that made it difficult to look away. "You apologized that day. You do not need to do it again." "I also sent you a text that was not meant for you," Emma said, because apparently her mouth had decided to be brave without consulting the rest of her. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a loosening, a small thaw along the edges of all that composed distance. "I was not offended by it," he said. "You were honest? I find that unusual." Emma did not know what to do with that, so she nodded and walked away. But for the first time, she noticed that when she glanced back from the service station, he was not looking at his phone. He was looking at her. Things changed slowly after that, the way seasons changed, so gradually you almost missed the turning point. Harrison began to say small things when she brought his coffee. A quiet observation about the weather. A dry comment about a headline on his phone that he would read aloud without explanation, as though assuming she would find it interesting. And she did. She always did. He was sharp and precise, and occasionally, unexpectedly funny in a way that was so understated it caught her completely off guard. One morning she came in to find a book sitting on table 4 with a yellow, sticky note on the cover that said only, "You mentioned you liked reading. This one is worth your time." She had mentioned it exactly once, during a 30-second exchange about the bookstore 2 blocks away. She pressed the book against her chest in the back kitchen and made herself breathe normally. She started looking forward to Tuesday mornings with a feeling she did not fully examine it. It was a rainy Wednesday when things cracked open between them. The restaurant was quieter than usual, and Emma took a short break, sitting in the small booth near the back with a cup of tea. Harrison was still at his table, but his laptop was closed for once and he was simply sitting, looking out the window at the gray, wet street. Something about the way he sat looked different, less composed. More tired, Emma walked over without planning to. "Are you all right?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him before she had fully decided to. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "My father built a company from nothing. He worked his whole life and lost everything in a business deal gone wrong when I was 19. He died 2 years later. I built Wade Enterprises because I needed to prove it was possible to do it right, to never lose control. Never leave anything to chance, said it flatly, without drama. The way people talked about things they had carried so long, they no longer felt the weight. I had been doing that for 11 years. And most mornings, I am not sure what any of it is actually for. Emma was quiet for a moment. The rain tapped softly against the window. My mom wanted to open a bakery, she said finally. She never got the chance. So I save a little every month because I think someone should get to open that bakery. I think that is what things are for. So that the people who come after us get to have the thing that got away. Harrison looked at her the way no one had looked at her in a very long time. Like she had said something that mattered, something that landed somewhere real inside him. His voice was lower when he spoke next. You are saving for a bakery, slowly she said, smiling a little. What would you call it? Carlisle, she said. Simple. He nodded once, and the quiet that settled between them after that was the warm, easy kind. The kind that only exists between people who have stopped pretending. When Emma finally stood to go back to her shift, Harrison looked up at her with those steady gray eyes and said, Emma. It was the first time he had used her first name. The book? Did you like it? She paused with her hand on the back of the booth. I stayed up until 2 a.m. because of that book. The corner of his mouth curved, and this time it was not almost invisible. It was real, unhurried, and it changed his whole face into something that made Emma's heart do something entirely inconvenient. She walked back to the service station and Brent was already there, eyebrows raised, holding a coffee pot like a prop. Do not say a word, Emma told him. Brent grinned. I was not going to say anything. He absolutely was. Emma told herself it was nothing. She was good at that, at wrapping inconvenient feelings in practical language and setting them on a shelf where they could not cause any trouble. Harrison Wade was a customer. A very wealthy, very guarded, occasionally thoughtful customer who left generous tips and recommended books, and had once, just once, looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. That was all it was. That was all it could be. She repeated this to herself every morning for 2 weeks while getting ready for her shift, and then completely forgot all of it the moment she walked into Rosewood Bistro and saw him sitting at table 4. It was a Friday when everything shifted for the last time. Emma arrived early, before the kitchen was fully running, to help set up the dining room. The morning light was pale gold through the front windows and the street. Outside was dusted with the first thin frost of the season. She was arranging silverware when the front door opened, and Harrison walked in 40 minutes before his usual time, which was already early by any normal person's standard. He looked different. Not in his clothing, which was the same sharp, expensive, perfectly fitted kind he always wore. It was something around his eyes. A tiredness that went deeper than one bad night of sleep. He sat down at table 4, and Emma brought coffee over without being asked, setting it in front of him gently, and then she did something she had not planned. She sat down across from him. You look like someone who needs to talk, she said simply. Harrison wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and looked at it for a moment. The board voted yesterday to push forward with a development project I have had concerns about for months. A whole neighborhood on the south side. Families have been living there for decades. The numbers make sense on paper. He paused. I keep thinking about what you said, about things being for the people who come after us. Emma leaned forward slightly. What did you tell the board? I told them I needed the weekend to review the proposal. And what do you actually think? He looked up at her. I think the numbers are not the whole story. I think I have spent 11 years making decisions based entirely on what could not be argued with. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that not everything worth protecting shows up in a spreadsheet. Emma was quiet for a moment, turning her teacup slowly in her hands. My Aunt Dottie always says that the right choice and the easy choice are usually not the same address, she said. She also says a lot of things that do not make sense, but that one stuck. The smallest laugh escaped Harrison. It was brief and a little rusty sounding, like something that had not been used in a while. But it was completely real, and it stopped Emma's breath for just a second. She had never heard him laugh before. She decided immediately that she wanted to hear it again. Your aunt sounds like someone worth listening to, he said. She would love you, Emma said, and then caught herself. She loves anyone who drinks their coffee black. She thinks it is a sign of good character. Harrison looked at his cup. I will keep that in mind. They sat there longer than either of them had planned, talking in the unhurried way of people who had quietly stopped counting the minutes around each other. Emma told him about her mother, about the recipe box she kept in her apartment with handwritten index cards for every baked good her mother had ever made, about how she had started testing the recipes on weekends, filling her small kitchen with the smell of brown butter and vanilla. Harrison listened the way he did everything with complete, focused attention, and asked questions that surprised her with how specific they were. What was the hardest recipe to get right? Did she have a signature item yet? Had she looked into small business loans? You sound like you were already planning the opening, Emma said, half laughing. Someone should be, he said, and his voice was perfectly even, but his eyes were warm in a way she was starting to recognize. The way the gray in them shifted to something softer. When he was saying something he actually meant, the restaurant was beginning to fill around them. Brent appeared at the edge of Emma's vision, made a dramatic gesture she chose to completely ignore, and disappeared back toward the kitchen. Emma stood reluctantly, smoothing her apron. I should start my actual shift. Harrison nodded and reached for his laptop. Then he stopped. Emma, she turned back. He was looking at her with that steady, direct gaze that always made her feel like he was actually seeing her rather than the version of herself she put forward for the rest of the world. I would like to take you to dinner. Not here. Somewhere you do not have to carry anyone else's plates. Emma stood very still for exactly 3 seconds. Is that something you want? He continued, his voice quieter. Or would you prefer I stop coming in every morning and making things complicated? You've been coming in every morning for 3 weeks? She said yes. You called ahead to confirm my schedule. Gloria made that call, he said, which was technically true and also completely not the point. Emma looked at him for a long moment, at the careful, controlled way he was holding himself, at the small tension around his jaw that told her this was not easy for him, that nothing emotionally unguarded was ever easy for him, and that he was doing it anyway. She thought about the book on the sticky note. She thought about the laugh she had just heard for the first time. She thought about a man who had spent 11 years building walls, tall, enough to keep everything painful out, and was now sitting at table 4 of a bistro on Michigan Avenue, asking a waitress to dinner with the same careful gravity he probably brought to every important decision of his life. Saturday, she said. 7 o'clock. And you are not allowed to talk about spreadsheets. The corner of his mouth lifted into that real, unhurried smile she was beginning to collect like something precious. Agreed, said. Emma walked back toward the service station, where Brent was already vibrating with barely contained excitement. She pointed at him before he could open his mouth. Not a single word. I was not going to say anything, Brent said in exactly the same tone he had used 2 weeks ago, with exactly the same expression that meant he was absolutely going to say many things the moment she was within range. But Emma was not listening anymore. She was thinking about Saturday. She was thinking about a man who had walked into her section of a restaurant one unremarkable Tuesday morning, and somehow, without either of them planning it, had made every morning after that feel like something worth looking forward to. She was thinking about a bakery called Carlyle's, and a recipe box full of her mother's handwriting, and the strange, tender possibility that the life she was slowly, carefully building for herself might have just made room for something she had not thought to put on the blueprint. Outside, the frost on the sidewalk was beginning to melt in the morning sun, and Chicago was waking up around them, and at table 4, Harrison Wade opened his laptop and stared at the screen for a full minute without reading a single word on it.